everyone, I'm back. I thought I'd do another video on dyeing since my last ombre dye kind of went a little south after I pushed the wrong button on the phone. So I'm working on a whole bunch of skirts for the dance studio. They look like this, and it's a really simple technique, and you can come up with some really cool ideas and options. But I also know that making a sample of that takes up a lot of space. So since I also am supposed to make one for this little lady, I thought I'd show you how I do my ombre dyeing on a very small scale. So in my buckets, I have got mixed up, here I'll tilt this down a little. I've got pink in here, and it is pink orchid. And I've got teal green in here. It's not the same colors as the one that I just showed you because I just got the teal green and I thought, let's have some fun with some teal green. And in this bucket, I have some wet circle skirts cut out for my American Girl doll. So the first thing I'm going to do, and these are the waistbands that you can see. They're just basically a rectangle. And I'm going to put those into the pink bucket, okay? Because I know I want those to be pink. So you can dye your waistbands whatever color you want, but in my case, the top of my skirt is going to be pink. So I'm just going to go ahead and dye the waistbands pink too. Okay. So then I'm going to pull out, I'm going to get a towel here. This is going to make a mess. I'm going to pull out my skirt. And you'll see, I'm going to wring it out a little bit so I can hold it up. So what I've got here is your basic circle skirt, right? And this one is shorter in the front and longer in the back. And that's just your, basic circle. All right, so I tend to like to dye the bottom part first. And so what I do is I try to get the bottom edges even. Now most things I would dye the fabric and then make the garment. That doesn't work for a circle skirt because you want it to be more or less the same all the way around. So what you're going to do is get your bottom edges together so that they're all more or less the same distance, like they're all kind of bunched in here, okay? And what I do is we just dip this. I'm using a mason jar. Please do not use anything that you would use for food. Okay, so these are my dye mason jars. And you can see in my jar I've got dye and I have got citric acid and hot water. Okay, I have just realized that I can use my tap water because for some reason our hot water heater is set up really high, so our tap water comes out at 140 degrees. So that kind of saves me some time if I can just use tap water. But you can check. I don't think you don't want your water boiling. I've used an electric kettle before too. That also works. If you're doing large pieces, you're going to need the stove or access to some much hotter water. So I just kind of dip this in here, and you can see it's not exactly the same all the way around. It kind of goes up in some places, and sometimes I'll dip it down really fast. And if you dip it down really fast, it makes a nice light shade. And then once I'm done and I've kind of got it where I want it to be, I will dip the ends and really get them dark because I kind of like that fade from really dark to a pale. And then I tend to leave a little bit of a white line in between my colors. And I think, so I have two skirts. So the second skirt, I think I'm just going to do pink so you all can see how to do a fade of just one color instead of doing two colors. All right, so I think that is about where I want this to be. You can wring it out a little bit. You'll end up with colored fingers, but the joy of dyeing. So now you can see what the end of this looks like. And I tend to open it up a little bit to make sure this looks kind of how I want it. And I see right there in the front how it's not very dark. There's not as much dye there as there is in the back. So on that one, I'll probably go back and dip it a few more times just to get it a little bit higher in the front, because I don't want it to be there. Okay, so we just dip it in there. And yeah, that looks a little better. Looks like I need to add a little more right there too. It's easier when you're doing a bigger piece and you have a bigger bucket. These little bitty pieces in a mason jar, maybe a little fidgety, but if you have a doll in your life that you sew for, I would suggest making some skirts for them. All right, and sometimes you're gonna get, so you can see up here, I've got some splotches, and really it's not gonna matter. Like, it kind of blends all together. You can be a little more careful. Like I said, this is kind of hard to do in a mason jar, so you might want to think about a bigger container. Okay, so now I've got the top edges. I make those more or less even too, and I stick it pretty much almost all the way down to the green. See that? You can see all the way around, it's almost to the green. Okay, so then I start dipping like maybe halfway down. You can kind of see, and you can kind of swirl it around in there. Get this nice and colored. Now the trick is you kind of want to keep it moving, right? You don't want to let this, you don't want to just hold it in one spot, or you're going to get a very solid line. The more you move it around and kind of move it up and down a little bit, the nicer the gradation is going to be between the dark pink and the light pink and then into the green. So as you can see, my top is getting really dark, which is what I want, and I'll probably dip this down a few more times to try to sort of even out that line a little bit. And if you get to the point where you have a really dark line and you're like, oh no, I've ruined it, you can actually take some of this dye, like a couple tablespoons, and put it in a clean thing of water, and you can use that to sort of even out your colors, because it'll be a much lighter shade, and sometimes that's a little easier to work with. All right, so I think I'm going to call this done. And I will say it's easier if you let it dry a little bit in between colors, because then you're not going to have the drips, which is how you end up with colors on. All right, so this is what our skirt looks like. I don't know if I could get it correctly here. Oh yeah, there we go. So this is our finished skirt. Once I rinse it out, I will call that done. Okay, I'm gonna lay that there. And I'm gonna get my, ow, that's hot. I'm gonna get my other one out of here. Like I said, this one's just the same. It's exactly the same as the other one, same pattern. All right, so for this one, I think I'm gonna do dark at the top and fade it to lighter at the bottom. So the trick with this one is, because I have, my waistband is dark, so I'm gonna want, okay, so this one I'm gonna get pink fingers, because I don't want the color to be, white at the bottom. I mean, a little white's okay, but I don't want it to be stark white, because that's not the look I'm going for. All right, so this one I'm gonna dip into the pink pretty darkly, pretty deep. If you don't want pink fingers, I would suggest wearing gloves. I have a tendency to have rainbow colored fingers, so I tend to not worry about it too much. Okay, here we go. And these are super simple to put together, even in big sizes, even in, you know, women's sizes. These are super simple skirts to put together, and they can really dress up a basic leotard if you just have a basic leotard that you want something a little special for. This is it's a really great idea. And this works for leotards, this works for yardage, scarves, whatever you wanna, whatever you feel like putting this on. Okay, let's see. I have got, I don't know if you can see, but the bottom has gotten really dark, which is what I want. And I'm gonna get my fingers a little more pink, because I saw on the back there was some that was still very white. I think this is probably about as dark as it's gonna get, and because you probably don't want to sit here and watch me dip fabric for hours. Okay, so here's what our solid color skirt looks like. You can see I probably dipped it a little far. The back looks really good. And if you want to even that out a little bit, you can dip that in a little bit like that. Let's see, even it out. It's not an exact science. Like I said, bigger skirts are a little easier to deal with, these little bitty skirts. But I think you get the idea. Thanks for joining me.